So, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's Volunteer Engagement webinar event. As we like to do with all of our webinars, we do so by reciting the promise of community action because that grounds us in our work and it reminds us of the families and communities that we all serve around the country. And it states that community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. So a little bit about us here in the learning community. The purpose of this project is really to analyze community action outcomes and identify effective, promising, and innovative practice models that alleviate the causes and conditions of poverty. Or the shorthand way of saying that is we want to help you all out there in the field build the capacity of our network to help us fight poverty more effectively. As a learning hub for the network, the LCRC supports agencies in the identification, adaptation, and implementation of innovative and evidence-informed promising strategies on the family and individual level and also on the community level. And we also want to help you learn more about maximizing those outcomes based on the CSBG National Performance Indicator. And through the learning community, CAAs can build their capacity and increase their impact by capitalizing on peer knowledge and expertise, creating effective strategies, and promoting those promising anti-poverty practices. So one of the ways that we help you all do that is through the facilitation of these webinar events that we call the National Webinar Series. And that's when we take some of those specific anti-poverty approaches and showcase them out to the broader CSBG network. And that will bring us to the content for today's webinar. So I'm very excited to turn things over to our AmeriCorps VISTA Lead, Charity Frankowski, who is going to introduce our presentation and then turn things over to some of our guest speakers that we have for today. So we're very excited to welcome her. And Charity, you're on. Go right ahead.
Hi, how's everybody doing? I am so excited to bring this content because for years since its beginning, Community Action has really engaged volunteers, and now the partnership is making sure that we bring all of the knowledge that we've had throughout the years and really kind of spreading that wealth through the network. So we're going to try and do a very kind of broad webinar today about volunteerism and about really creating the advocate that you want in your volunteer, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to bring you some more information about engaging our volunteers. So today's objective is really to build a community of champions for your program, one volunteer at a time, and we'll go over kind of how to do that. While we are going through our presentation, we're really going to focus on defining the role of a volunteer. Can AmeriCorps help you in your organization? As an AmeriCorps VISTA, that is something that's, of course, close to my heart. Then we're going to go ahead and we will talk about recruiting volunteers. We'll talk about training volunteers, and then the most important, how to keep those volunteers and keep them engaged. All right. So the first thing that I really, it is how you kick off a volunteer role. It is really evaluating the needs of your program. Have that conversation with your staff. Start talking to them now about what can a volunteer do to help you. And it's not just answering phones. Oftentimes there are lots of ways that staff can get behind or that staff have ideas about, but they just don't have the manpower to go ahead and realize those ideas. So this is an opportunity where volunteers can really be a part of innovation and seeing an idea that a staff may have all the way to fruition. Next is have that volunteer experience really focused around the client. In order to do that, you want to talk to your clients. So ask them, if we had volunteers, how maybe could volunteers help you? And then lastly, you want to talk to your existing volunteers. Existing volunteers are eyes and ears that people forget about when we have those staff meetings. So think about that wealth of knowledge that the volunteers bring because they've been witnessed, and kind of bring a testimony to all that you do in your organization. So if you talk to them, they will definitely have ideas as to what ways more volunteers can help. All right, next slide. So part of that defining your volunteer role is really thinking about how a volunteer is going to help you. Instead of letting them kind of take the lead, really figure out what is best that you'll need for your organization. And there are lots of different ways. Often people think, oh, well, we'll have people come and help feed in our kitchens, or we will help have volunteers come and do weatherization projects. But there is a lot more that they could do if you just structure that role a little bit more. So think about if you need part-time help. Think about if you need full-time help like a VISTA. That part-time help, that could be an intern. It could be very flexible, like an intern who may come and go at a different schedule. Now, VISTAs, we are full-time volunteers who are in your organization 40 hours a week. So we really get a lot done, especially since our focus is building capacity and helping build sustainability. So we do a lot of your back-end work that you always want some help with and never have time to do. We're really great at kind of building on what you already have so that you can go on to have amazing programs. So many of the focuses that VISTAs have across the United States in AmeriCorps is managing volunteer programs, building your volunteer force, as well as funding and really helping with in-kind or grants. So think about that. If you really need a full-time person to come and help build capacity for your program, a VISTA might be the way to do that, where you're not going to expend funds that you don't have on a salaried person. The only thing that you do have to think about is that that VISTA is there for a year. So if you really want a staff person that's going to be longer than a year, then obviously that's not the way to go. But a leg up, a start, VISTAs are perfect for. Seasonal help, of course, and those rolling opportunities for volunteers, as well as that one-time engagement where there's a family that comes in and that helps you just that one time. So really, before you kind of create that volunteer role, think about all the different options that you have. All right, next slide. Okay, on here I have put up a volunteer description, a job description that is not the best job description. There are a lot of things that it is missing that you could benefit from if you added. So we can go on to the next slide, and this is a breakdown of things that you might want in your volunteer description. So often people forget to add their mission, even though it is the focus of what you're doing in your organization. You want to make sure that you start with that strong foot, that you remind all of the volunteers, hey, this is exactly what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it. And so that's what that mission does. So when you have your volunteer descriptions, please put that at the top. Next, of course, you will have the position that you have. It won't just say volunteer. It'll be specific to the idea of the support that you need. Next, those qualifications and requirements, you don't have to just put, hey, high school diploma or time available. If you make it explicit, then people will be able to see, okay, they actually are looking for someone who has a non-judgmental personality. See how that's specific in those qualifications? That's something that people don't necessarily put in there, but it's a good idea to have in there. All right, we can go to the next one. Okay, so next we have the duties, but we also have the expectations of the volunteer, because often people will just write down the specific tasks that a volunteer is expected to do, but then they don't support the volunteer in letting them know, hey, what are the boundaries within that job description and within that expectation. So if you lay that out for the volunteer, then they're the one that kind of knows, okay, now I know what I'm getting into. And I can continue with this role of volunteer or not. Also time commitment, that is incredibly important. You want to lay that out, but you already have that information because before you started with your job description, you thought about what that role is and what type of role you're filling. So here you'll know if it's a part-time person, how many hours, or if it's a rolling opportunity, how long they'll have to spend each time they visit your center quarterly. All of that would go in that part where it's a time commitment that's laid out for them in the job description. All right, then benefits. This is the thing. So we're volunteers. We're not getting paid, but you know what? It comes with a great amount of benefits. Not just, oh, but it feels good. But there are other things that happen. We are skill building. We are help changing a community. This is your opportunity to say you now are a champion for my program because you are being an advocate and I'm going to teach you how. And these are the benefits that are going to happen with your service and your advocacy. Once you lay that out for someone, they go, oh, of course, I kind of knew that, but hey, now it's getting explained to me in a better way. So failing to express what the benefits are for a volunteer will only shoot yourself in the foot. So you want to make sure that you have that in there. And then, of course, who are you going to contact? And how are they going to contact that person? I think oftentimes people forget that chain of command when they talk about volunteer roles. So you want to make sure that that volunteer knows who they're reporting to. All right, Sandy, next slide. All right, so there it is. You want to make sure that you have your mission in there. You want to talk about who are your volunteers and who are they reporting to? When are they needed and for how long? Where does that get performed? What location? What are they responsible for performing, and how do they perform those tasks? So you want to lay that out for that volunteer so that there aren't any questions, because the more informed they are, the better volunteer you will have. All right, AmeriCorps, my heart. So VISTAs, we talked about how VISTAs are there for a year in your program. They're there to build capacity, to build sustainability for your program. Most of the time, that focus is either fundraising or volunteer management. So if you go in with that mindset thinking, gosh, we have so much opportunity and we could really do some amazing things with an army of volunteers, but you as a staff person, you just don't have the time to get that going, your VISTA would be that person who would do that. So that is a person who is there 40 hours a week, all year. Think about it. Next, AmeriCorps has state and national programs that aren't specific to poverty fighting. So if you really need something that is more environmentally focused or safety focused, there is an option for you with AmeriCorps. You can use that state and national option. And then again, if there is something that's a little bit more of a seasonal option for you, you only need someone there for a few months. Not only that, but you are really looking for someone to do direct service with your clients, that would be summer associates. VISTAs are not allowed to do direct service because our focus really is building capacity, but summer associates can do that. So have those summer associates make those applications to AmeriCorps and get some help. That's what AmeriCorps is there for. All right, next. All right, next we have Madeline. Madeline, please come introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I just wanted to give a short introduction of myself and ABCD. I have been the volunteer coordinator here at Action for Boston Community Development for almost a year now, so I still consider myself fairly new to the role of managing our volunteer program, but I'm excited to look back over the past year and see what we've been able to do, and I certainly have a laundry list of things that I am looking forward to accomplishing in the coming months and next year. So if we could just go to the next slide, please, that would be great. Okay, perfect. So just a small introduction on ABCD for those that may not be familiar with us or familiar with the Boston area. But ABCD, we serve over 100,000 individuals annually, and our service area covers Boston proper, and I believe it's over 15 other neighboring communities. We're a fairly large agency. We have a staff of about 700 that are spread all across the city. And some facts about our client base is that almost 70% of our clients live at or below 125% of the federal poverty level. And our volunteer force is really the backbone of how we are able to really provide the necessary services and programs to our client base. We have volunteers that serve throughout the city at our 14 neighborhood service centers, our 29 Head Start sites, and we have several downtown administrative and field offices in Boston as well. A really cool fact about our volunteers last year, over 3,500 volunteers donated almost 69,000 hours across the agency, which I think is a unbelievably awesome number. And you may be thinking, who are these volunteers that are in ABCD's volunteer force? Due to the high density of colleges and universities in the Boston area, we do have a lot of college and university students. We do work with several high schools in and around Boston. We get a lot of working professionals. Our Head Start parents volunteer in the classroom, and then of course our corporate and other organizations that help out during one-time events or fundraising events that we have throughout the year. And our volunteer force is really involved in all aspects of the agency. They provide tons of administrative support. I'm sure you all know the mountains of paperwork that there is to be done, so they really help out with that. But they also help out, as Charity mentioned, with the direct client service. We have mentorship programs, tutoring initiatives. Our tax prep volunteers do an amazing job every year. I'm sure many of you are getting geared up for this coming tax season. I believe last year our volunteers actually contributed $8.4 million back to the community. So that's a goal we're hoping to beat again this year. And like I mentioned, we have several special events that we have throughout the year as well. Next slide, please. Okay. Charity did a wonderful job talking about your volunteer recruitment practices. So I'm just going to mirror her a little bit here, but something that I've found while managing the volunteer program is that it really actually mirrors the recruitment process that we do for staff. I say that because we need to ensure that there's a lot of collaboration between, you, the volunteer coordinator, and your program managers to identify the needs of their programs. They know the jobs that need to get done better than anyone, so you really need their input and buy-in. They know what kind of skill sets they're looking for. They can help you draft those robust job descriptions that we saw earlier, and then obviously to keep everyone else in the loop in your agency, securing the approval from key management people. Go next. Okay, so volunteer recruitment practices really can take on a whole life of its own. Coming from an urban perspective, we get a lot of our volunteers and interns really from word of mouth. We've been around, in the community for so long, and there's not many people in the Boston area who, haven't heard about ABCD in some way, whether it's Fuel Assistance or Head Start, and they just want to, look for a way to get involved. But there are some other proven methods that we utilize whenever I get a new job description from a program manager. We utilize a lot of free online platforms. Many of these may be familiar to most of you: Volunteer Match, Handshake, Connect and Serve. We also go on individual university and college portals. Most of them are joining Handshake, though, so that does make it easier. But ABCD, we do actually have our own WordPress blog, which kind of serves as like our volunteer opportunity directory, which is something that we can update as we need to, and we can add different content there. So that's also an option for folks to look into. It's also cost-effective. We also attend, like I mentioned, we have many, many universities and schools in Boston, and I find that really connecting on the personal, face-to-face level is a really great way to, let people know about your agency, and then show them the different ways in which folks can get involved. We've even toyed with the notion of hosting one here at one of our sites, and inviting other community members as well. But that may not be doable for many organizations, but we're playing with that idea as well. More and more folks in corporate America are looking for their employees to get involved within their communities. So I have found over the past year that companies with social responsibility programs or an added benefit to their employees where they can serve, X amount of hours per quarter or annually, those are increasing. So I've gone to several private volunteer fairs on-site at a company, and those have been a great way to really bolster, your relationship with individuals, but also that institution who may become, a bigger player within your agency down the line. And also going to tie back into the university component, but looking and reaching out to educational institutions with service learning components. They are also increasing in number for those of you with universities or colleges in your area. They have been a wonderful, wonderful addition to our volunteer force. The students that are enrolled in courses that take part with the service learning centers at their schools can provide, a more formal partnership. And, you can either have them for one semester, which is still a great amount of time, or you can go year-long, which is another wonderful thing to incorporate. And then, obviously, as you keep going out into the community and keep posting and keeping an online presence and meeting people, the word of mouth will definitely gain some traction. And that's what we're experiencing right now, which I'm very, very grateful for. So it makes my job easy in terms of recruitment. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the next slide I have here is a volunteer newsletter. This may be a resource that not many agencies utilize. It's one that ABCD has been doing for the past few years now. And I find that it's a really great way to keep ABCD's community, current and past volunteers, our corporate partners, and the general public involved with what volunteers are doing at ABCD. It's also a cost-effective way to showcase and highlight volunteers' work that they do at your agency. And, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, professionally done. You know, definitely getting assistance if you have, you know, graphic designers or, you know, communications department. Even we've utilized, you know, communications interns before in the past to help us with the layout and the design and the distribution. So you can definitely get some help with this as well. But we find that distributing to our board at the monthly meetings through constant contact has been a really wonderful way to get the word out. And I am constantly reaching out to our current volunteers, you know, to have them send me pictures and commentary and their feedback about their own personal experience with ABCD so that we can include it in future newsletters, and that just really increases the kind of content that we want in the newsletter. And I believe, Hyacinth, if we could show the newsletter.
We actually can't, for some reason, it's not being able to be shown, so we will include, I know, so we'll include it in the slides and in the email. We'll include it as an attachment for all of those who are interested.
Okay, perfect. Well, you all will get a copy of ABCD's volunteer newsletter at the end. But I'll just go over quickly the kinds of content that we include or in each publication. We try to do it biannually. I know the goal is to do it more often than that, but that's really what we can do at the moment. But in terms of content, we always try to have some sort of welcome or an address from our executive team or someone on the board, and they're, you know, we always try to get them to touch upon how volunteerism is important on a personal level, but also how it's important for ABCD and Boston and the surrounding communities. We try to include recaps of different events that ABCD holds throughout the year where we had volunteers present. You know, we'll try to get some pictures of the group or volunteers in action. We typically do a volunteer or an intern spotlight. You know, we'll sit down and we'll interview a volunteer or an intern and get their perspective on their journey throughout ABCD and, you know, why it's been a valuable experience for them personally, or has it affected their education, you know, increased their skill set, you know, et cetera. We'll typically do a corporate partner spotlight so that our corporate partners will feel, you know, recognized. We do have some reoccurring folks that come every year, you know, as Charity mentioned earlier with the seasonal help. And then we also include a recruitment bulletin of, you know, the volunteer opportunities that we're currently looking for, and then instructions on how to get in touch with us, or if they have questions about volunteering, who to call, and then also give them access to our WordPress blog where we keep the detailed job descriptions of the positions we're currently advertising for. But you will all get that at the end of the presentation. Sorry that we couldn't show it to you today. And I think I have one more slide. Oh, no, I'm done. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Madeline. I appreciate your joining us, and of course, I will get those the copy of the newsletter out to everybody.
Thank you, Pat.
No worries. So next we have Cheryl. She's from Kentucky. Thank you, Cheryl, for coming in.
So Cheryl, it looks like you might be muted on your end of the phone, but it looks like the sound should be coming through from the computer. So maybe check out your phone. Cheryl, are you there? Are you able to hear us? Okay. You should be connected. You can hear us. Okay. It looks like you're connected into the audio.
Yes.
Is that you, Cheryl?
Nope. Can you hear me?
No, yes, we can.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. I just had the craziest technical difficulty. Give me 2 seconds and I'll be right back.
You got it. This is all part of the presentation right now. Working with volunteers can work around some challenging schedules and unexpected things, right?
That's right. Hiccups happen with volunteers, hiccups happen with technology, hiccups happen all the time. All right.
Ooh, I am here.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. My computer literally just logged off and I had to just run through the whole boost back up. But nonetheless, I'm Cheryl Weiss. I'm the development manager here in Lexington, Kentucky, and I work for Community Action Council for Lexington, Fayette, Bourbon, Harrison, and Nicholas counties. Madeline was providing you an urban perspective on volunteer recruitment and retention, and I would like to provide you with the rural perspective considering we are located in Kentucky. All right, so as far as engaging and sustaining volunteers, in Kentucky, we are including interns as well because Lexington, Kentucky, as you may know, is located, well, the University of Kentucky is located within our city, within our county, and that provides us a huge outlet for students and post-education millennials here in Fayette County. We are a college town. The population is 315,000, and you'll notice that Fayette County's poverty rate is a little bit higher than the state and U.S. Average. So the average person is 34 years old, and that puts us directly in line with millennial outreach. And in addition to UK, we have other schools which you'll see coming up. The council, we serve 4 counties. Lexington is considered the city, and then we have Bourbon, Nicholas, and Harrison counties, which would be considered more of the, even more rural than Lexington itself. You can go on to the next one. All right, so as you heard, I'm the development manager, and what I wanted to do today is provide you with a slightly different scope of how I recruit volunteers and engage volunteers from my position, as I'm not charged with directly coordinating volunteers or capturing and recruiting them. Excuse me. However, being that I'm the development manager, it is my job to build community relations, and I'm in charge of fundraising and event planning, but that also gives me leverage to go into the community and talk to businesses, talk to any kind of philanthropist, any of our constituents, talk to people who are supportive of Community Action Council and our mission and community in general, and that way I can engage them into who Community Action Council is. Meanwhile, as I'm developing a relationship with them more so for my direct priorities, which is the fundraising and event planning, I'm also developing a relationship with them in order to get them engaged with Community Action Council and future opportunities that we may have that arise, whether it be one-time events, whether it be annual, or it's just an ongoing need that our community engages or takes part of. So the correlation between development and volunteer recruitment involves networking, outreach, invitations, and engagement. What I've recently done is when I went to there's a community published, well, in each community you'll have published resources, and that said, what you'll have is here in Lexington, excuse me, I lost my train of thought. Here in Lexington, if you can click on that link, or when you receive the slide, you'll be able to click on that link. But Commerce Lexington sends out a published resource, and in the back of that resource, they will provide the who's who, and that essentially is just either new hires within a company, promotions, or anything notable that a business or the community itself wanted to submit. So what I've done is I've gone through the who's who, and I've taken congratulations cards, and then I would write personal congratulations to that person within the community, include my business card, and then in most cases, most scenarios, they will send me an email thanking me for the acknowledgement. At that point, that is the first step that I can engage upon taking the initiative to build a relationship with them. So what I'm doing is not only am I congratulating them on their accomplishment or their new recent endeavor, but then I'm getting geared into who they are, what position they hold within their organization, their business, and then my goal is to capture the entire company or business based on that one connection, that one congratulations card. And so the same thing happens when you see Downtown Lexington Partnership meet and greets. Those are events specific to the community in which you can find in your community as well, whether they're frequent or infrequent, but you can find engagements, you can find events to attend, you can find possibly ways to figure out who has taken on recent accomplishments, successes, who has achieved something phenomenal, spectacular. It could be in the newspaper, but just taking that initiative to reach out to that person and then developing the relationship from there, it can always yield to asking them or inviting them to participate as a volunteer for your organization. And below that, you'll see 3, 2, 1. That is a strategic process that you can use in order to continue to maintain contact with the people that you initially interact with. And that said, what you would do is instead of reaching out to somebody one time and then life goes on and you forget to reach back out to them, you would create an organized systematic chart where each week, and the 3, 2, 1 is completely flexible to how you see fit and how you desire to mold it to fit your needs. So what I've done is each week, 3 people will receive an email just to say, hey, how are you? Touching base, seeing how everything's going, hope all is well. 2 people will receive a phone call, and then 1 person will receive an invitation or just the awareness of something going on in our community to find out their interests or engage if they're going to attend or if they'd like to attend if I plan on attending. And it's just a way to continuously keep people engaged and communicate with them to keep everyone in the loop. And then another example would be locating certain businesses, organizations, corporations that provide a day of service for their staff or their employees. That's another great way to find volunteers, and it could be something as simple as Googling it for your location, for your city or your community. Madeline had actually given me information about www.doublethedonation.com when we were talking about the corporations providing a day of service. That is a website to check out. That is literally doubling the donation by finding businesses and corporations that are willing to match your organization's efforts. And go on to the next. All right, thank you. So as you see, we have a specific example where this worked out. It's the 5-step process to a perfect agency advocate. It does not always work out that perfect. However, what happened in this scenario is we had a program called Summer Cooling, where we provide air conditioners to elderly people who have medical conditions. And that program in itself caught the attention of one of our community members. So from there, she contacted us and she donated, and she had the resources, whether it was a new air conditioning unit or just the funds so Community Action Council could purchase the unit. But what we did is we then talked to her, engaged with her to figure out what her general interests were with community and Community Action Council specifically. And from that point, we invited her to be a board member, in which she gladly accepted. But once she accepted the role of board member, she naturally became more involved with Community Action Council and our initiatives and our mission within the community. But her increased giving, it wasn't just revenue, it was donating her time and energy and her talents as well. And to the point where she has become a true agency advocate for Community Action Council, as she has attended official, political meetings and advocated for Community Action Council on our behalf. That process took about, I would say, 2 years. Oh, sorry, you can go ahead. I would say that process took about 2 years. We're going in our 3rd year with her being from the start of her interest with one program to her becoming an agency advocate. So it's not overnight, but it's definitely not forever either. So when you see this slide, maximizing your advantages, if you notice, this is literally a Google search, colleges in Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky at that. So if you drop down to Bluegrass Community and Technical College, you will see their population is 9,940 students, their enrollment. And then the bottom 3 schools listed here is Sullivan, Transylvania, and University of Kentucky. And again, it'll have the enrolled students to the right. Those 4 schools out of these 13 are the only 4 located in Lexington, but being that Lexington is more of a, I wouldn't say overpopulated, but it's the concentrated area amongst many rural counties, we have plenty of colleges and universities in our surrounding area. And even though you'll see 22,000 students at the University of Kentucky, I want to draw your attention to Transylvania University, because that's actually been, when I say the golden ticket for our volunteer base, you'll see in these next few slides, that is where we've reached out. And you can actually go ahead to the next one. The reason being, Transylvania University is literally 1.1 mile away from Community Action Council, the administrative office. So within this radius, we are also we're located within the highest zip code of poverty within Lexington. And that means something very substantial to Community Action Council in addition to Transylvania University. So what we did was, you can flip to the next. What we did about 2014, so about 3 years ago, is we started with one project within one classroom at Transylvania. And little did we know, again, little did we know that it was going to develop into such a large and sustainable relationship 3 years later. But we took the necessary steps and we engaged with the university enough to where we created that relationship in addition to supported their initiatives as well. So once we had the project and the classroom participation, we then found a board member. We invited our a professor to be on the board for Community Action Council, and he said yes. And then in 2015, the relationship was rekindled between the Writing, Rhetoric, and Communications class and Community Action Council. So in 2016, the students, it took a lot of collaboration with the professors. It took a lot of collaboration with the department as well. So what we did is we talked to them to figure out how they wanted to incorporate Community Action Council or incorporate our mission and what we do within the community into their curriculum and into their essentially their syllabus for the semester. They were very interested in doing so. So what transpired from there was the students filming the first, it's poverty simulation project, and it was literally a video explaining poverty within the community. Then the students created and filmed videos highlighting another program, Project Life, that the council, we promote and we support for students, or excuse me, teens aging out of foster care. And then to develop and to continue engaging with the students and the professors in Transylvania University as a whole, we then asked for the students to create infographics for the program outcomes and needs within our community. And you can flip to the next, and you can see an example of where the students are taking on these projects as projects for their class, projects for their assignments, but it's also a collaboration between Community Action Council and Transylvania University to achieve measurable outcomes, to map, and to figure out what needs are within Lexington and the surrounding counties. You can flip over to the next. And so in the future, too, we're doing the onboarding videos. We're getting them more and more involved in videos and production of examples like this, the infographics and the information necessary for the community to see. And it's just a great way to partner with the university, their students, and their professors. And then if you want to flip to the last one, the beauty in the whole situation is what we learned about Transylvania University is that they are just as passionate about what poverty looks like as Community Action Council is and how to eliminate it, prevent it, reduce it. They want their students to have an understanding so their students can see themselves as capable of helping others to make a difference. And that's exactly part of Community Action Council's, Community Action Partnership's promise. We, at the Council, we provide opportunities for the students so their skills can translate into help for nonprofits, which leads to helping community, whether it be Lexington, whether it be Kentucky, or whether it be the student's hometown, home city, home state. So, again, this started as a project and it became a relationship, and that is something that you don't always foresee, you don't always map out, but it's the consistent engagement, the consistent outreach, and the invitations and the development within itself that yields maybe not the attention of one person, but possibly their company or their business. And then the students, their research provides opportunity to utilize information each semester and beyond. So they may be in the same major, same focus for 4 years, and so they may see Community Action Council semester after semester, or they may move on, but as long as we engage the professors in the specific department and stay connected, then we have the opportunity for the information to be built upon each semester. And again, from freshman to senior year, it's a layered understanding that creates a path, and it's the pathway out of poverty for Community Action Council and our community. And then the million-dollar question, how do we continue strengthening relations with professors and universities? It's determination. It's determining the desired outcomes. It's creating the awareness for the students. It's reaching out to community members, the professors, the university, the departments. It's the exposure and development, but it's also achieving results and measurable outcomes so you can make a difference. And that within itself is what drives community to continue supporting community. And essentially, within there, the development and the volunteers then can unite and create a conglomeration of success for both entities.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Kicking butt in Kentucky. That's all I got to say about that. That's fantastic. That idea of, that idea of the support of Transylvania University and those students and the service learning, the robust service learning that you guys do. Well, that is something that I'm glad we're able to bring to the partnership and to the network, across our network. Because even Madeline in Boston was doing service learning, and she had a great program of service learning, but really Cheryl's program in Kentucky kind of took that one step further, especially with the projects that those students were doing. So thank you, and that is hopefully something that we can spread the word on. So you guys really talked quite a bit about recruitment. We're really just kind of going to go through really fast about different ways to recruit. You guys are already using college campuses very well. Don't forget those job fairs, especially in rural communities where there are a lot of job fairs for people who are unemployed because the unemployment rate is higher. I would go ahead and table at those job fairs and say, we are not looking for employees, but we are looking for volunteers, and this is a way to build skills. This is a way to pad your resume. So come volunteer with us for 6 months. Hopefully we can get you ready for the workforce and get you in even better shape to be hired. So use that angle. I don't know how many of you guys are going to the old-fashioned Kiwanis clubs or the Lions clubs, or of course the Girl Scouts in your community, things like that. Please start attending those meetings if you haven't. Get yourself in front of them once, twice a year. Pick different organizations that are around you and start building partnerships. Building partnerships with people that you are not expecting to get volunteers with ends up getting volunteers and even advocates. So build those partnerships. Right now, especially here in cities like Washington, D.C., and where I'm from in Orlando, social responsibility programs in industry is popping up everywhere. So that is something that you definitely want to get plugged into. The place to go for that is definitely your local Chamber of Commerce, and those are partners that you want to continue building strong relationships with, because they are your contact into your business community. Finally, social media, of course. Social media, everybody is using now, Facebook and Twitter, but it is not the only way to get yourself those volunteers. Lastly, you want to go ahead and talk to people wherever you are, at the bank, at the grocery store checkout line. If you are not wearing your community action t-shirt or your community action pin while you're out, then you are losing an opportunity to be an advocate, to gain volunteers, and to spread the word about your organization. And of course, churches, community partner events, things like that. All right, next slide. Okay, so when we talk to people, we want to be passionate about what we're talking about. It's not just our regular elevator speech. We want to use the language that we have in our mission, because those missions are well crafted. Those missions use language that is memorable. So when you walk away from a conversation where somebody is using that language in their elevator speech, they think, oh, that was really cool. Maybe I should check them out and, you know, and help with them with their next weatherization project. People can smell that type of passion. and they can feel the difference in those generic mass emails that everybody sends. When they become generic like that and you start to send them to everybody, they lose a little bit of a personal touch. They lose a little bit of a human kind of contact. So try and make things more personal than just those mass emails. When you are recruiting, do not forget to capture names. Take that wherever you go. Ask people for their business cards. Ask them, can I contact you via email, or you know, can I call you next week about something? Don't be shy about that. I think people often are willing to get contacted more than you give them credit for. You're not a robocall, so don't think of yourself as a robocall, because this is a personal connection. Scripts can work, but try and make them feel a little bit more personal. That was definitely something that I've worked on in the past, making scripts for your volunteers, so then when your volunteers are your ambassadors, when they're making telephone calls for you or writing emails for you, then they have the framework of what you want to say in that communication, but feel free to make that personal. So if you know somebody has a dog and loves dogs, don't forget to write something about that on the in the email or in that personal note. And don't be scared of the ask. All right. All right, so training. You have already started your training while you're recruiting somebody. So think about that process as a whole connected dot, linear way of making that community advocate, because your training has already started because you are using mission language in your recruitment. So when you are training somebody about your organization, they're already starting to be familiar with what you do. So think of training as soon as you recruited them. While you're in training mode, it is important for it to feel robust. It is important for them to feel like they are a part of something bigger than themselves. Volunteers want to feel that this thing that they're doing has an impact, but it also has a ripple effect. So while you're in your training, of course, you want to talk about basics, not just you'll be serving food in our kitchen, but start talking about other things too, like how to answer phones, talk about safety in your facility, or confidentiality with your clients. All of those things are important for a well-rounded volunteer to know. So the other thing is if you are limiting your training, then you are limiting the things that that person can advocate for when they're out in the community for your organization. So feel like the more that you tell them about what you do and about how you do it, the more armed they are with information when they go out into the community. If you tell them about different staff roles, that is something that they'll be able to talk about when they're at church or in the grocery store line. So don't necessarily limit that training to just, can you answer phones and can you answer phones this way? There's more to it, and let them know that. Okay, so not only we're talking about the staff roles, but we're talking about monitoring their duties. So let them know what their expectations are, well, that you will be monitoring how they're doing, but that you'll communicate that information back to them. Also, evaluation. Well, volunteers want to know how they're doing. Don't think of it as just criticism. Think of it as an opportunity to not only make them better, but to make yourself better. So that way, right from the beginning, these volunteers know, oh, okay, I'm able to kind of even influence the process as I learn more about my role as a volunteer with the organization. Ongoing contact. I think often people wonder, well, how much do I contact my volunteers? How much is too much? So if we think about Madeline doing her newsletter and making that robust newsletter a quarterly newsletter, know that when you are drawing your contact calendar for the year and how often you are going to contact your volunteers, you will add in there, okay, quarterly they already get a newsletter. We already know that we have 3 events per year that we invite our volunteers to. So that means they're getting that quarterly newsletter, then they're getting 3 more event invitations that you know right off the bat. So where are the gaps? What is the time of year where you don't have that newsletter going out? What's the time of the year where you don't have those event invitations going out? In that time, in that space, is when you can use other resources to continue building the relationship with that volunteer. So that special call from the ED, hey, I wanted to say thank you very much. You made this impact on this day, and it was a big deal. Also, board members, I think volunteer coordinators forget to include their board members in their community of service. So ask your board members, they're volunteers too. Ask your volunteer board members to get involved with the volunteer process. Maybe one of the volunteers, maybe one of the board members wants to do a volunteer training one time or do part of a volunteer training. That's another face that is getting connected to a volunteer, but it's also building your relationship with that volunteer and deepening that relationship with your organization. Oftentimes, parents want to say thank you very much to different volunteers who've had contact with their children. For instance, we have been connected before with an organization where we have volunteers come in and read to our kids at Head Start to help build vocabulary and reading fluency. Well, I had a parent who was so happy that we had volunteers doing that. That parent wanted to call a volunteer to say thank you because their daughter had remembered that interaction. And so we took that opportunity, and that parent called that volunteer, and that volunteer was our best friend for the next 6 months. She would have done anything for us. So make sure that you have those contacts that happen with those volunteers. All right, and of course, staff training. This is another one that I think people forget to include volunteers with. If you know that you are having a staff training coming up that is focused on child abuse, and it's just making sure that all of your staff members are up to speed on child abuse statistics, or a scenario where you have a client that is dealing with that, you might have volunteers that are working with children that maybe they need to be involved in that training too. How often are you bringing those volunteers into the same trainings where you have staff training? They're often generic enough where the volunteers can be included. So make it personal and make it strategic. Evaluation. I think people get scared when it comes to evaluation. Sometimes they don't want to know the answers. Sometimes they don't really want to hear people's opinions, but the thing is that once you ask that question, it is an opportunity for not only the volunteer to become better, but for you to become better as a volunteer coordinator and for your organization to do better in managing those volunteers. So at the end, when you do talk about evaluating volunteer performance, make sure that you include your own performance. Think about just that growth opportunity right there. So not only is that volunteer meeting your expectations, but are you meeting the volunteer's expectations? And how can you make those expectations, how can you meet their expectations better? It's that time. You're cultivating that advocate at that time. All right, so we eventually want to make all of our volunteers community advocates. So they might start out as that supporter. Maybe they volunteer on and off. Maybe they will talk about your organization to others. They might give on and off in kind or money. But we want to make those supporters advocates, people who are giving, people who are giving of their time and giving of their money and or giving in kind. However they can give, however they can support you, they are doing it. But not only are they doing that, they are now doing community outreach for you too. So let them have that opportunity to tell people what they've witnessed as part of, excuse me, as part of the things that they've done with your organization. All right, next is, how are you thanking your volunteers? This is another way to kind of make that personal. Oh, did I not talk about all the advocate or support? Yes. So can you talk about, they can talk, you want to make sure that those volunteers are talking about your mission and specific things that have happened to them while they were a part of your organization and as a volunteer. All right, next slide. Excuse me. All right, so it is Thanksgiving week. Thank you. Yes, I know that you're thanking your volunteers. I'm sure you are sending those thank you emails, especially during Thanksgiving week. But do what you can to kind of make that personal. So that handwritten note really goes a long way. That call from the senior staff member, maybe your ED, maybe your board member, this is the time to do it. But not only are they saying thank you, the next part of that is asking those questions. How can we do things better? What kind of ideas do you have for us as an organization to get better? Because every time you include a volunteer, that really builds a stronger connection. Now, there can be too much. There really can. But if you are strategic about it and you include every kind of touch that you have with your volunteer into a communication plan, into a strategic plan that you've already created at the beginning of the year, then you will already can see where are the holes that you are not talking to your volunteers and when are you starting to talk to your volunteers too much. So if you plan it out and make sure that you have a calendar where you're staying connected with your volunteers, you will also see where you can kind of lay off, where you can give them a little bit of space. And let them know you're giving them some space. So you can tell them, hey, you know, for the next month, we as an organization are going to be busy doing something over here. So we're not going to be focused on volunteers as much. But we will be sure to reconnect with you once that big project is over. Next slide. Now I want to talk about why we do this. Why are volunteers so important? At Community Action, it is part of our organizational standards. So in our organizational standards, in Category 2, it states it. Community Action is often the backbone organization of community efforts to address poverty and community revitalization. Leveraging funds, convening key partners, adding the voice of the underrepresented, and being the central coordinator of efforts. It is not an easy role to play, but a vital one for families and communities. So think about how our role in coordinating volunteers in the community helps bolster that community, helps lift up that community of poverty. We're all doing it and we're all doing it together. one last part of the slide, one last slide here. I had a colleague talk to me about the theory of change. And since I'm kind of new to community action as a VISTA, I really liked how this slide really helped me kind of connect the dots, because I know how important volunteers are, but this is an opportunity to see not only is community action changing and influencing the community around it, but how the volunteers are a part of that. So in this part where it has performance management, that section there, I read that and I thought, yes, volunteers are really helping individual, family, national performance indicators. We are impacting those indicators. Volunteers are impacting those community, national performance indicators, because together we're working together to kind of change what your community looks like. All right. So we said so much today. We talked about how important it was to define that volunteer role. We talked about how possibly AmeriCorps could help you, and in the different ways that we could. Our wonderful speakers talked about how they use different things to recruit volunteers in their area in Kentucky and in Boston, but we talked about other ways so that you can recruit volunteers where you are. We talked about the importance of training and a robust training, and making that training start right at recruitment. And then keeping those volunteers, keeping them engaged by helping build their skills and by helping them be involved with your organization, with training, maybe with being contacted personally by certain people in your organization. So all of those ways are going to help really make sure that that volunteer becomes your community advocate. Questions? Does anybody have any questions?
We actually got one question in through the chat earlier, and maybe we can pose it to Madeline and Cheryl as well, if they're still on the line with us.
Awesome.
But one of our attendees wanted to know if all of our presenters here can provide a little bit more insight on some of the software or systems that you use to build a database of your volunteers.
Cheryl, you want to go first? Can you talk a little bit about your volunteer database?
Yeah, we actually don't utilize one, not anything organized, not anything specific.
Okay.
We create spreadsheets and we create events. Like we have a God's Pantry, we partner with them, and we have a pantry located in one of our centers. And so we have an ongoing calendar, a community calendar. But as far as utilizing the software, we don't use anything specific.
I think you're not alone. I think you're not alone. What about you, Ellen?
Yes, I've been in the weeds for the past 4 months or so. We're actually implementing a system called Volgistics. I believe it's probably one of the more popular systems that nonprofit agencies in general are using in terms of volunteer management. We have not gone live yet. There's still, you have to build it from the ground up, but I'm currently in a testing mode right now with a few of my managers that have interns with them. But it's really met so far all of the items and the checklist things that I was looking for in terms of a management system. Before, like Cheryl, we were using like a glorified spreadsheet, which can only do so much. So my goal in using the volunteer system is to get a clearer picture of where folks are, how long they're here, assigning, dollar values to their hours. Volunteers are able to record their hours, taking out the data entry work that comes with, applications and resumes. So it's been a positive experience so far, but it's still a lot of work, but I would recommend looking into it. Their support, their customer support team is great. They're very responsive, and it's also very cost-effective. We looked at a few other options, including the volunteer module in Razor's Edge. We looked at Better Impact, Volunteer Hub, and there's one more that I'm forgetting, but this by far was the most cost-effective option, and also hit the majority of, our wish list items, so to speak, for ABCD's volunteer program.
Awesome. At the city, so we used FileMaker. That really helped organize our volunteers. And then I was with another organization in Central Florida, but they were actually across the state of Florida, and we used eTapestry. Now, eTapestry was really cool because it was an online software, so it was kind of all that information was in the cloud, but we were really able to not only collect all of the volunteer hours, but we were able to see how often we would contact our volunteers. We used that as part of our strategic communications plan, and also that also connected with fundraising too. So we knew which volunteers gave the most amount of money, we knew which volunteers gave the most amount of time, and we also knew which volunteers gave the most amount of in-kind donations. So not only was that good for individual volunteers, but that specific software, again, it's called eTapestry, that also connected people through an organization. So, for instance, at PACE, we had the American Association of University Women. That was a big donor for us. But also, we knew which of our volunteers were part of the American Association of University Women because we saw so on that eTapestry database. So we saw collectively this group did this much for our organization. So it might not be the University Women for you, but it might be the Lions Club, or it might be Altrusa, or something like that in your neck of the Elks, something like that. All right, that is it. Are there any other questions?
We'll give you maybe like 30 seconds to enter in any last questions that are scrambling your brain. While you're doing that, we do want to repeat that today's webinar is recorded, and that and the link to the slides and some of the other resources that we talked about will be shared to everyone through a follow-up email, and the recording and the slides will be posted to the partnership's website. So you'll have a couple of different touch points to keep on track with this information. So I don't see any other questions. So if not, we'll have some contact information at the end to reach out to Charity and some of the other staff, and through that email, we'll get you connected with our presenters as well. So if you have any direct questions, you can reach out.
Yes. Thank you again, Madeline.
Thank you.
And thank you, Cheryl.
So thank you all so much. I'm going to take Charity off camera so she doesn't have to keep smiling.
Right.
But thank you all so much. I want to reiterate again, thank you to Madeline and Cheryl for taking the time to walk through a little bit more of your volunteer process with us.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you. Of course, we were so excited to have you. And as Charity mentioned towards the end, working with volunteers is actually a very integral part of the Community Action Network and the work that we do every day. And I can say from our office that having a volunteer, a full-time one like Charity, has really just totally exponentially increased the amount of work that we're able to do. So it's something that you can utilize, and they're out there. There are people that are willing to give their time and that will then champion your work throughout your community. So please make sure you're utilizing them. So quickly, some other resources to get you connected with and some other upcoming events. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about what successful anti-poverty practices look like for community action agencies across the country, we encourage you to check out some of the publications that we have released over the last couple of weeks as a part of our anti-poverty practice series. That is where we are recapping all of the major lessons learned from the last cohort of the learning community across some of our various topics. So if you want to learn more about bundling services or why it's important to be a trauma-informed organization, you can check those out. And even we have one if you want to run your own learning community on the state and local level. We have a toolkit for you to get started. So you can find all of those publications on the Partnerships website. If you go to our tools and publication library, they're right there. We encourage you to check those out. And here's where you can get to it. If you go to our homepage, drop-down menu, it's right there. We also encourage you to follow the Learning Community blog. If you would like to receive specific updates as new resources and events occur within each of these specific topic areas, again, you can go to the homepage on our blog site and you can enroll on the right-hand side and you can sign up for those email updates. We also encourage you to visit the CSBG TTA Resource Center. This is the big bad, database where all of our information that has been uncovered across our, decade-long work with training and technical assistance across the Community Action Network is stored. So if you want to learn more about not just resources, but also consultants in your area, that's the place where you can go check all of that out. So the link is right there on your screen. We encourage you to go check that out. Also, we have some other national webinar series events coming up. As I mentioned, that anti-poverty practice series, we're about halfway through that, but again, that's when we're talking about those best practices that we learned from community action agencies that participated in our 20-month intensive learning community process. So we've already had 3, but the remaining ones in the series are going to be on November 28th, where we're going to be talking about our Rural Impact Project. It's actually the work that Charity does with us, managing the AmeriCorps VISTA volunteers who are located at 10 sites across the country in rural communities who are focused on utilizing 2-generation approaches to impact poverty in their communities. And also on December 4th, we have a summary of the Financial Empowerment LCG and best practices there, and both of those will be accompanied by publications. So we do encourage you to visit our website to register for those. And another space that we are very excited to continue the conversation with you all on is in our racial equity work. And on November 29th, if you want to learn more about the resources that have been shared, many of which are specifically geared towards community action and their place in their communities, we very much encourage you to join us on the 29th for our Racial Equity Resource Review. That is where LCRC Project Director Tiffany Marley and myself will be going through some of the resources and places that you can go to gather more data on racial equity and racial injustice in your communities. And also on December 6th, we are very excited to feature Prosperity Now in their racial equity work, where they're going to be talking about one of their newer publications, The Road to Zero Wealth, How the Racial Wealth Divide is Hollowing Out America's Middle Class. We very much would like for you to join us for that conversation. We would be remiss if we didn't mention the rest of the LCRC team. I hope everything is okay. I'm going to mute that person in the fire truck. Hopefully everything's okay. But we're going to keep going. Of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't introduce the rest of the LCRC team. Of course, you can see Charity there at the bottom. Thank you again for leading us in today's conversation. Again, I'm Hyacinth McKinley, so right above her there. And we are also joined in our team work by Tiffany Marley, the project director, Joel Crocker, the director of training and technical assistance, Courtney Kohler, who's our senior associate, and Liza Porras, who is our program associate for the training and technical assistance department. So, thank you for joining us for today's event. If you liked what we talked about, we really would like to receive your feedback. We do try to take that into account to craft future webinar events, but also offerings that we do throughout the year, particularly at our annual convention. So if this is something that you like and you want to hear more about, we very much encourage you to just take a few moments to fill out the survey using the link here on your screen. And finally, here is the contact information for each and every one of us, except Charity's not on there, but you can reach her at cfrankowski@communityactionpartnership.com. But the rest of us are also available to direct any of your questions or concerns, so please feel free to reach out with any of your training and technical assistance needs. But with that, that is going to conclude our webinar presentation for the day. Thank you all so much for joining us, and enjoy your holiday. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.